Do not enter Tang San Party, do not enter Our Lady. Abuse Tang San, abuse Tang Hao, abuse Shrek Seven Monsters, abuse Master, abuse Haotian Sect. Qian Daoliu picked up a child from the pile of dead people and named it Qianye as his adopted son. 6 years later, Qianye awakened the seven sins angel martial soul, which has 7 forms. Qianye, with the 7 sins angel martial soul, traverses the continent and is invincible in the world. Several years later, from a high position in the papal hall, Qianye looked down at Bibidong and said coldly, "Sister-in-law, please abdicate." The Thousand Knights King descended upon the papal palace, and at that moment, darkness enveloped the entire continent. Keywords of the novel. People in Douluo, martial soul 7 sin angels with no pop-ups, people in Douluo, martial soul 7 sin angels. Download the complete text, people in Douluo, martial soul 7 sin angels. Latest chapters for reading. Chapter 1. Children Found in the Dead. New books for collection. You are listening at novelfull.audio. Chapter 1. Children Found in the Dead. New books for collection and recommendation, Burial Mound. Weeds are tangled and stained with blood. A nauseating smell emanated everywhere, with corpses piled up into a small mountain that looked shocking. Everywhere are limbs and arms broken, some even rotting, revealing a pale skeleton that makes people shudder. A man dressed in a light gold shirt stood quietly in front of those corpses. He looked like he was in his 30s or 40s, with long golden hair draped behind his back. His face had sharp contours, and his eyes were as deep as the starry sky and the sea. It seems that we were one step late. Haotian Sect has escaped, the man said calmly as he looked at the pile of corpses in front of him. I didn't expect Haotian Sect to be so ruthless that even the villagers in the neighboring village wouldn't let go. Next to him, an old man looked at the man and immediately spoke up. "All right, let's leave first." The man calmly spoke as he looked at the tragedy in front of him. Wow, wow. At that moment, amidst the pile of corpses, suddenly came the cry of a baby. In the arms of the female corpse, a baby soaked in blood burst into tears. The old man next to him was shocked to see the baby and said, surprisingly, a baby survived. The blond man looked at the baby with an excited expression in his eyes. He had just experienced the pain of losing his son and never expected to see hope for a new life in this chaotic burial mound. Just as Sun Ji passed away, you came to this world. Are you here to bring me hope? The blond man murmured and walked step by step towards the child. The blond man approached the baby, broke open the mother's hand, and held the baby in his arms. My son has died, your village has been slaughtered, and your parents have also passed away. We can all be considered as people from the ends of the earth who have fallen. The blond man hugged his child and continued, we have a fate, and I will name you Qianye. From today on, you will be my son of Qian Daoliu. 6 years later. Martial Soul Hall. 9,970,980,990,1,000 in a room, a robust little boy, naked in his upper body, began doing push-ups. It wasn't until 1,000 that the little boy stopped. The little boy is Qianye, who was saved by Qian Daoliu back then. Qianye stood up, her black hair hanging down, and on her handsome and determined little face, she looked indifferent. Although only 6 years old, the solid muscles are full of explosive power. In a pair of dark eyes, there is a hint of coldness and nobility, like a towering king. Qianye stood in front of the mirror, looking at her current self, and murmured, has it finally time to awaken her martial soul? It seems that I am not far from revenge. Qianye looked at herself in the mirror with a pair of dark and stern eyes filled with hatred. What nobody knows is that Qianye is actually a traveler. 6 years ago, he traveled to a village near the Haotian Sect, where his originally happy life was destroyed by the Haotian Sect. He comes from Earth and has read the original works of Douluo continent. From birth, he has carried memories with him. Therefore, he remembers everything that happened back then. Over the years, through his father's storytelling and his own compilation of the plot in the original work, he has come to understand what is going on. 6 years ago. Tang Hao, who knew the identity of the Silver Soul Beast, also took his wife's silver to stroll around the Martial Soul City, but unexpectedly caught the attention of the people in the Martial Soul Hall. Qianye is a soul beast that has been around for 100,000 years, how can there be no reason not to kill him? At that time, Pope Qian Sunji led the people of the Martial Soul Hall to besiege Tang Hao and Qianye. As a result, Qianye sacrificed himself to Tang Hao, greatly enhancing his strength and severely injuring Qianshu and Ji, resulting in his serious injuries. After returning to the Martial Soul Hall, Qian Sunji was ambushed by Bibidong and died as a result. After Qian Sun died of illness, Qian Daoliu's thoughts were shattered. He spread his anger on Tang Hao and wanted to use Haotian Sect to force Tang Hao to appear. However, when he arrived at Haotian Sect, Haotian Emperor seemed to have abandoned his original address, fled and retired. Haotian Emperor was worried that the villagers in the neighboring village would leak their whereabouts, so he slaughtered everyone in the neighboring village. The village where Haotian Emperor slaughtered was the village where Qianye was born. That is to say, Emperor Haotian killed his parents, his neighbors in the same village, and his relatives destroyed the village where Qianye was located. Perhaps due to carelessness, Qianye, who was still in his infancy, survived. Because Qianye carried memories, Qianye, who survived, remembered everything. He remembered the scene of his father being killed and his mother fighting to protect him. I remember the scene of all the villagers in the same village being slaughtered, the scene of their bodies being dragged to the mass grave and abandoned, and the scene of the entire village raging fire. And all of this is because of Tang Hao, because of Emperor Haotian. If Tang Hao didn't wander around the Martial Soul Hall with Qianye, who is a soul beast, and if Tang Hao could bravely stand up and take on everything when being chased by Qian Daoliu. So, if Haotian Sect doesn't live in seclusion, he won't slaughter the surrounding villages. So, the village where he is located will also be spared. However, what Qianye hates even more is Haotian Sect, because they did all of this. Whether Tang Hao or Haotian Sect, Qianye will never let go. Ye heir. At this moment, a voice came from the door, and I saw my adoptive father Qian Daoliu standing at the door, waiting for me. Although Qian Daoliu may appear to be in his 30s or 40s, he is actually over 100 years old. In theory, he is already more than enough to be his grandfather. But Qianye understood that Qian Daoliu had just lost his own son, and he was completely hopeless. But I found myself in such a pile of dead people. It was only then that he saw the hope of a new life, that he hoped to have a son to ease his grief. Therefore, he recognized himself as his son rather than his grandson. Father. Seeing 1,000 streams, Qianye respectfully shouted. As the son of Qian Daoliu, Qianye does not reject him. After all, Qian Daoliu is one of the few normal people in the Douluo continent. In the original work, anything done by Qian Daoliu is worthy of respect. Back then, he liked Poseidon, but after learning that Poseidon liked Tang Chen, he didn't bother and withdrew directly. He learned that his daughter Law Bibidong had killed his son, but in order for Qian Rengshu's growth, he endured his grief and let Bibidong go. Finally, sacrificing oneself for one's granddaughter opened up the inheritance of the god of angels. No matter what, Qianye felt admired. Now, Qianye is proud to be the son of Qian Daoliu. Today is the day for you to awaken your martial soul. Wash yourself up and I will take you to awaken your martial soul. Qian Daoliu spoke calmly. Qianye nodded and agreed, then walked into the bathroom. He was also filled with longing in his heart, not knowing what kind of martial soul he would awaken. End of this chapter. Chapter 2. Martial Soul Awakening, Dark Angel. New book, various requests. You are listening at novelfull.audio. Chapter 2 Martial Soul Awakening, Dark Angel. Various requests for new books. Awakening Hall. The huge hall stands on top of the martial soul city, with golden walls emitting a quaint and solemn atmosphere. There are two huge angel statues at the entrance, with a majestic posture that seems to overlook the entire martial soul city. At the entrance of the main hall, 2 rows of guards stand. These guards are all wearing armor, wearing swords around their waist, standing over 3 meters tall, and fully armed. This is the awakening hall of the martial soul city, which is the place where the children of the martial soul city awaken their martial souls. Qian Daoliu brought Qianye here, and the guards saw Qian Daoliu with an extremely frightened expression in their eyes. They quickly knelt down towards Qian Daoliu and Qianye. Farewell to the great offering. At this moment, all the guards immediately knelt down towards Qian Daoliu, bowing their heads very respectfully. Qian Daoliu waved his hand casually, gesturing for them to get up. Looking at the main hall in front of him, Qian Daoliu smiled and said, "Ye heir, this is the awakening hall. The people of our martial soul city used to awaken their martial souls here when they were young." Qianye looked at the main hall in front of her and nodded slightly. Qian Daoliu looked at Qianye and immediately said, "Don't worry, no matter what martial soul you awaken, you are my good child." Qian Daoliu lost a son, so he cherished this son even more. Even if Qianye has not awakened any powerful martial soul, with his strength and the power of the martial soul hall, he can still be protected for a worry-free life. Qianye nodded and said, "I understand, father." Qian Daoliu led Qianye into the main hall. At this moment, the staff in the hall were startled when they saw Qian Daoliu. One by one, they came to Qian Daoliu with great respect. Farewell to the great offering. Everyone knelt down and bowed towards the 1,000 streams. The parents who came to awaken their martial souls, with their children, immediately knelt down with their children when they saw such a battle. Many of them have never seen the grand offering of the martial soul hall, but they have all heard of the prestige of the grand offering. The great worship of the martial soul hall, the Douluo worship hall standing above the papal hall. His position in the martial soul hall is even higher than that of the Pope. So, who dares not respect him? Qian Daoliu calmly said, "Everyone, get up." At this moment, the crowd stood up, but their gaze appeared on Qian Daoliu and Qianye. Next, it is time to awaken the martial soul. Qianye walked into the hexagonal array without any fear in her eyes. At this moment, the entire hall's gaze was focused on Qianye's body. 6 years ago, almost everyone in the martial soul hall learned that the grand deity Qian Daoliu had found a child and recognized him as his own son. Therefore, many people have long wanted to see what kind of person the adopted son of Qian Daoliu is. Today he came to awaken his martial soul. How could they miss such a wonderful moment? I don't know what kind of martial soul the adopted son of the great offering will awaken. Since it can be seen by the great offering, natural talent will not be inferior. It's not certain, only at the moment of awakening the martial soul will we know. The people in the main hall were discussing and staring intently at Qianye. It is the master of this awakening hall who awakens for 1,000 nights. He is a soul Douluo level powerhouse. He looked at Qianye with kindness, and immediately injected soul power into Qianye's body. With the injection of 6 soul powers into Qianye's body, there was no change above Qianye's body. At this moment, the soul Douluo frowned slightly, somewhat incredulous. However, he continued to increase his soul power output for a full 10 seconds, and still did so. Now, even this soul Douluo couldn't help but wonder. What exactly is going on here? This scene immediately caught the attention of all the onlookers around, their faces filled with doubt and surprise. Shouldn't it be? How could this result be? According to convention, once awakened successfully, attribute fluctuations will inevitably be released, but Qianye has not released any fluctuations at all. At this moment, Qian Daoliu's gaze was fixed on Qianye's body, and he was also somewhat surprised. He immediately said, "Let me come." As he spoke, Qian Daoliu gently waved his hand, and the golden soul power instantly injected into Qianye's body. At that moment, Qianye's body seemed to be instantly activated. The originally quiet hall suddenly erupted into a loud roar. Immediately after, an incredibly powerful wave of energy swept out, striking in all directions and shaking people's hearts. So strong. This terrifying aura made everyone around feel a tremble in their hearts. At this moment, a dazzling golden light flickered on the surface of Qianye's body, and strands of black and white airflow surged out of Qianye's pores. The black and white airflow condensed in the air, gradually forming a black and white vortex. In that moment, the temperature in the entire hall seemed to drop sharply. Seeing this scene, everyone widened their eyes and looked shocked. Is this Xiaoye's martial soul? In the eyes of Qian Daoliu, there is a dazzling light shining. At this moment, Qianye suddenly felt a piercing pain on his body, as if his back had been torn apart. Instantly, his back was torn apart, and a pitch-black wing slowly stretched out from his back. Immediately after, Qianye suddenly looked up, his wings suddenly opened up, like two sharp blades, cutting the void in half. His body rose into the air and suspended in the air. Oh my goodness! He actually grew wings behind him, black wings. What kind of martial soul is this? Is it an angel martial soul, but how could his wings be black? Everyone around looked at the wings behind Qianye in shock, their faces full of disbelief. At this moment, the wings behind Qianye continued to stretch out, 1, 2, 3. A total of 6 wings were stretched out. Those wings are all black, emitting a faint cold luster. At this moment, Qianye also froze for a moment, looking at the black wings behind her. What is this? Qian Daoliu looked at the wings behind Qianye, with a surprised expression in his eyes. These 6 black wings give Qian Daoliu a very dangerous aura. And the rest of them also looked bewildered, unaware of what kind of martial soul Qianye had awakened. Immediately, evil auras emanated from Qianye's body, and a powerful pressure filled the entire hall, making everyone present feel breathless. Those powerful soul masters, facing this pressure, can barely resist. But at this moment, all the children were lying on the ground. That's a pitch-black angel. At this moment, the entire hall was completely silent. End of this chapter. Chapter 3. 7 Sin Angels, 7 Forms of Martial Souls. Seeking Collection. You are listening at novelfull.audio. Chapter 3 7 Sin Angels, 7 Forms of Martial Souls. Seeking Collection. At this moment, Qianye was floating in the air of the main hall, with black and white light constantly flowing around her body. At this moment, even Qian Daoliu had never seen the martial soul awakened by Qianye. Is this the angel martial soul? Is it a mutated angel martial soul? Everyone's eyes showed a look of surprise. The entire hall has been shrouded in black and white light. At this moment, Qianye opened his eyes in mid-air and looked at his body. Perhaps others don't know what the martial soul of Qianye is, but Qianye has traveled through time, so he naturally knows. His martial soul should be called a fallen angel, also known as a sin angel, or a demon. He remembers that in Western mythology, there were a total of 7 angels of sin. Arrogant, angry, greedy, jealous, lazy, lustful, and gluttonous. There are a total of 7 fallen angels. Looking at their current situation, did they awaken the fallen angel's martial soul? At this moment, messages came from Qianye's heart. That was information about his martial soul, and suddenly, his consciousness was dragged into a space. That is a huge space, dark, cold, without any vitality. Endless darkness enveloped the space, and suddenly, a beam of light illuminated Qianye. He could see clearly what the space looked like. That space feels like a huge cathedral. In the church, there are 7 incredibly huge cross pillars, on which 7 fallen angels are bound. The 7 fallen angels have different forms, but they are all the same, bound to the cross by a chain and unable to move. At this moment, Qianye was completely shocked. What is this place? Isn't he awakening his martial soul? How did you suddenly come to this place? Are these 7 fallen angels the 7 sinful angels? Qianye stood in the center of the 7 crosses, watching the 7 fallen angels. Suddenly, an evil glow emanated from the bodies of the 7 fallen angels. From those 7 directions, 7 beams of light suddenly shone towards Qianye, directly enveloping Qianye. Immediately after, the 7 beams of light transformed into 7 black rays, instantly merging into Qianye's body. Subsequently, waves of dark breath escaped from Qianye's body. A message flashed through Qianye's mind. Qianye was stunned. At this moment, Qianye realized that these 7 fallen angels seemed to be giving him martial soul power. As he guessed, these 7 fallen angels were arrogance, anger, greed, jealousy, laziness, lust, and gluttony. Qianye was surprised to find that these 7 fallen angels had bestowed upon him 7 different powers. Is this my martial soul? Qianye suddenly understood that in his previous life, he had read novels from Douluo continent and also related novels. This allowed him to know many martial souls. However, the martial soul of Qianye is undoubtedly the most special existence among these martial souls. He is not a twin martial soul, nor does he possess 7 martial souls. He only has 1 martial soul, but this 1 martial soul has 7 forms. These 7 forms are pride, fury, greed, jealousy, laziness, lust, and gluttony. That is to say, Qianye possesses the first 7 forms of martial soul on the mainland. This is simply an unheard of situation. This kind of martial soul is definitely a unique existence. Qianye's heart was filled with excitement, and his heart couldn't help but beat rapidly. And all of this falls in the eyes of everyone. Everyone's gaze was focused on Qianye. Qian Daoliu's heart was incredibly complex. He looked at Qianye and murmured, "There is an angelic aura, but it is an evil aura. Is it a mutated martial soul?" Qian Daoliu continued to murmur, "It seems that it has mutated from other martial souls to an angel martial soul. Therefore, this angel martial soul is pitch black." Although Xiaoye's martial soul is not the authentic angel martial soul, it can also be considered as one of our angelic lineages. Is this a redemption bestowed upon me by heaven? He lost a son, and heaven rewarded him with another son. All of this seemed to be destined by fate, and a strong sense of joy surged in his heart. As for the effects that will occur after Qianye awakens his martial soul, Qian Daoliu can no longer care too much. No matter what martial soul Qianye is, he is his own son. He has already lost a son, no matter what, he will not lose another son. At this moment, the terrifying soul power around had converged into Qianye's body, and Qianye regained its original appearance, falling from the high altitude of the main hall to the ground. At this moment, Qian Daoliu immediately walked over and looked at Qianye in front of him, his eyes full of shock. "Xiaoye, are you okay?" Qian Daoliu looked at Qianye and immediately asked. Qianye shook her head and said, "I'm fine. Do you have any special feelings?" Qian Daoliu looked at Qianye and asked. Although Qian Daoliu was good to herself, Qianye still decided to hide everything for now. She just nodded and said, "There's no special feeling, it just seems like there's suddenly a lot of power added." Qian Daoliu seemed to remember something and immediately looked at the soul Douluo, saying, "By the way, I haven't tested my soul power yet." At this moment, the soul Douluo took out a level 20 crystal ball and came to Qianye's face. He immediately spoke up, "Back then, Your Highness Qian Rengshu was born at level 20. Now that Your Highness Qianye has released such terrifying martial souls, I'm afraid they are also born at level 20. Qianye placed his hand on the crystal ball and immediately injected soul power. The pitch-black soul power instantly injected into the crystal ball, and soon, a terrifying pressure erupted from above the crystal ball. Buzz! The crystal ball trembled violently. After a moment, the crystal ball actually cracked open, and the crack was like a spider web. Bang! The next second, the crystal ball instantly exploded and turned into fragments. On everyone's faces, an incredible expression appeared. The Soul Douluo widened his eyes and looked incredulous. Impossible, how could this be? At this time, everyone's expression was exactly the same as that of the Huduro, and I couldn't believe the fact that Qianye had just injected soul power and blew up the crystal ball. At the moment when the crystal ball exploded, even Qian Daoliu showed a shocked expression. He stared fixedly at Qianye, able to shatter the crystal ball, which meant that his innate soul power exceeded level 20. Surpassing innate level 20. Oh my goodness, is this the strength of His Highness Qianye? It's too scary, isn't it? Everyone looked at Qianye in shock, disbelief. End of this chapter. Chapter 4. The Enemy of Bibidong. Seeking recommended tickets. You are listening at novelfull.audio. Chapter 4. The Enemy of Bibidong. Seeking recommended tickets. The Papal Palace. A beautiful woman sat on the position of the Pope, in a golden long dress that fit perfectly from head to toe. The dazzling dress shimmered with over 100 red, blue, and gold gemstones. The 9 curved purple gold crown on top of the head is even more dazzling, holding a scepter about 2 meters long, inlaid with countless gemstones. Her fair skin and almost perfect appearance make her look so unique. Especially the intangible nobility and sacredness revealed on one's body, it makes one unable to resist the feeling of bowing with a bow. In a pair of majestic eyes, filled with infinite grandeur, this woman is the Pope Bibidong of the Martial Soul Hall. At this moment, a pitch-black figure instantly arrived at the main hall and immediately knelt at the woman's feet. I saw a man in black, with a cold face and a hint of chill, as if even the air had been frozen. The newcomer is the powerful subordinate of the Pope, the ghost Douluo ghost. See below the Pope's crown. Qianye Daoliu knelt down in front of the woman, bowing respectfully. At this moment, the woman slowly raised her arm and gently stroked her forehead. Her light purple hair slid down, appearing incredibly elegant and luxurious. Her indifferent voice spread throughout the entire palace. Get up. Daoliu stood up and respectfully said, under the crown, Qianye has awakened a mutated angel martial soul. After listening, the woman nodded slightly and looked at Qianye Daoliu with some shock. Mutant angel martial soul. Bibidong lightly lifted his vermilion lips. Qianye Daoliu remained silent for a moment and said, Qianye has awakened the angel martial soul. I believe that this matter must be reported to your majesty. The woman frowned and immediately said, in theory, that Qianye was picked up by Qian Daoliu. It shouldn't have awakened the angel martial soul. How could it awaken the mutated angel martial soul? Daoliu immediately said, that angel is a pitch-black angel, and it contains an endless evil aura. I think this is not an angel's martial soul, but just like an angel. Bibidong immediately nodded and looked at Daoliu, continuing to ask, so how is his soul power? Qianye Daoliu immediately said, Your Majesty, it seems that he has surpassed the innate 20 levels. Upon hearing this, Bibidong could no longer sit still and suddenly stood up from his chair. Exceeding the innate level 20. It's impossible. Bibidong exclaimed in surprise. She just casually asked, but who knew, she received such news. This news really surprised her. Being born at level 20 can already be considered a powerful existence. In the history of Douluo continent, only his daughter Qian Rengshu has such a powerful talent. But I didn't expect that this wild child picked up could surpass the innate 20 levels. Bibidong stood up, looked ahead, and immediately spoke up, Ghost, why do you think Qian Daoliu picked up a wild child to come back? The ghost immediately lowered its head and dared not look at Bibidong. It quickly said, I don't know. Bibidong continued, when Qian Daoliu asked me to become the Pope, it was because in the Martial Soul Hall, no one else could take on such a great responsibility except for me. However, I didn't expect Qian Daoliu to pick up such a talented wild child. The ghost immediately understood something and said, "Crown, what do you mean? This Qianye is so talented, Qian Daoliu naturally wants to support him to replace me." Bibidong's eyes showed a hint of coldness. Upon hearing this, the ghost immediately said, "Crown, do you want me or not?" The ghost spoke and made a killing gesture with its hand around its neck. Bibidong immediately laughed. "Do you think that with you, you will be the opponent of Qian Daoliu?" The ghost immediately said, "No matter how much the great offering protects him, there will always be a time when he falls alone, just me." Bibidong shook his head and said, "If he dies, who do you think Qian Daoliu suspects?" At this thought, the ghost immediately understood and lowered its head slightly. Bibidong continued, "If this wild child dies, I'm afraid Qian Daoliu will come to me desperately. I'm not Qian Daoliu's opponent yet, so I can't touch that wild child yet." The ghost immediately said, "Yes, I'm being rude." Bibidong looked ahead and immediately said, "Well, even if he has a high talent, he's just a wild seed now and won't affect our overall situation. Let's talk about this later." "Yes." Ghost Douluo immediately said. At this moment, a cold smile appeared on Bibidong's face and he immediately said, "Since this wild seed has awakened his martial soul, then I will go and meet him." Afterwards, Qian Daoliu left with Qianye. Qianye spoke up first, looking at Qian Daoliu and immediately saying, "Father, my martial soul is a dark angel. Will it have any impact on you?" Upon hearing Qianye's words, Qian Dao turned his head and looked at Qianye with a smile, saying, "Child, do you think being a father would care about these things?" Qian Daoliu looked at Qianye and continued, "I know there are many evil soul masters on this continent, but it doesn't mean that having a dark martial soul will definitely make you an evil mage. Moreover, in this world, the strong are supreme, and there is no absolute justice or evil. No matter what martial soul you have, it cannot determine your future life. Moreover, as a father, I have already lost a son, so no matter what you do in the future, I will always stand on your side." Upon hearing this, Qianye looked up at Qian Daoliu. Perhaps because Chihiro died of illness, Chihiro poured all his emotions into himself. Qianye nodded and said, "I understand." At this moment, Qianye and Qian Daoliu saw a person from afar, walking towards them step by step. The one who came was the Pope, Bibidong. Bibidong dragged his splendid purple palace dress and walked elegantly towards the two of them. Qianye saw Bibidong without any fear in her eyes. Qianye's heart was clear that there was a rift between Bibidong and Qian Daoliu, and Bibidong was the culprit who killed her brother Qiang Sunji. If it weren't for the sake of Qian Renshue's face, Qian Daoliu might have killed Bibidong long ago. So, although the two may appear harmonious on the surface, in reality, both sides treat each other as enemies. Qianye doesn't like Bibidong either. He has read the original work and knows what kind of person Bibidong is. In Qianye's eyes, Bibidong is an extremely disgusting person. No matter how poor Chihiro's illness is, she is also a pope and a title Douluo. But what about Yu Xiaojiang? Just a useless and deceitful swindler, not only ugly but also lacking any skills. In the original work, how many foolish things did Bibidong do for such a prison anus? What disgusts Qianye the most is that Qian Rengshu is Bibidong's biological flesh and blood, but she has never cared about her. Even she didn't want Qian Rengshu to call her mother, but instead called her sister. After Qian Daoliu brought her back, she has exposed her killing intent to herself more than once. Therefore, compared to Bidong, Qianye naturally has no favorable impression. Bibidong approached Qian Daoliu and pretended to say, "I've seen a great offering before." Qian Daoliu didn't pay attention to her. Bibidong saw Qian Daoliu ignore her and immediately looked at Qianye, continuing, "I heard that my younger brother awakened his martial soul today. I don't know what martial soul he awakened." End of this chapter. Chapter 5. I want to revenge myself. Looking for a monthly pass. You are listening at novelfull.audio. Chapter 5. I want to revenge myself. Looking for a monthly pass. Before Qianye could answer, Qian Daoliu immediately spoke up and said, "What do you want to do?" Bibidong smiled slightly at the corner of his mouth and looked at Qianye with a smile, saying, "I heard that Qianye's younger brother awakened his martial soul today, so as my sister.in.law, I naturally want to congratulate him. This is a timeless soul bone, let's give it to my younger brother as a gift." Bibidong said, taking out a box and handing it to Qianye. Qianye naturally knew that Bibidong was not well-intentioned, so he immediately looked up and smiled slightly, saying, "Thank you, sister.in.law. However, I won't accept your gift." "Brother Qianye, why are you so outspoken? Anyway, I'm also your sister.in.law. Can I still harm you?" Bibidong continued as he looked at Qianye. However, Qianye ignored Bibidong at all and immediately said, "Father, let's go." Qianye and Qian Daoliu bypassed Bibidong directly and walked towards the front. Bibidong looked at Qianye's departing figure with some surprise. This eternal soul bone, no matter who it is given to, everyone will be grateful to her, and this kid seems to have a good mind. However, Bibidong didn't pay too much attention. Originally, he came to Qianye just to test it out. Qianye returned to the palace where he lived. At this moment, Qian Daoliu looked at Qianye with a smile and said, "Xiaoye, you did a good job." Qian Daoliu naturally regarded Qianye as a 6-year-old child and immediately asked, "Why don't you want the soul bone given by your sister.in.law?" Qianye calmly said, "I don't like her." Qian Daoliu smiled slightly and said, "You did a great job. Although she is your sister.in.law, you need to be careful of her." Qianye nodded and said, "I understand." At this moment, Qian Daoliu looked at Qianye and continued to speak, "Xiaoyi, do you want revenge? I know that although you are young, you mature earlier than your peers. Since childhood, you have hidden your hatred in your heart. In fact, I hope you are happier than revenge." Qian Daoliu looked at Qianye and said. Qianye looked at Qian Daoliu and immediately said, "Our village was slaughtered by Haotian Sect back then. My biological parents also died at the hands of Haotian Sect. I must avenge this." Qianye thought for a moment and immediately looked at Qian Daoliu. "Father, help me become stronger." Qian Daoliu looked at Qianye and said, "Actually, if you want revenge, I can send someone to destroy the Haotian Sect. You don't have to work so hard." Qianye shook her head. If he were just an ordinary person without childhood memories, perhaps he wouldn't have such great hatred in his heart. However, he is a traveler, and he is born to know it. Since he came into this world, he remembers everything. He remembers how Emperor Haotian slaughtered their village, how Emperor Haotian killed his biological parents, and how he was protected by his mother and ultimately trapped among the dead. He remembers all of this. So, he wants revenge himself. Whether it's Tang San, Tang Hao, or the entire Haotian Sect, Qianye will not let go. Previously, he did not awaken his martial soul, and Qianye was still worried about whether he could seek revenge on his own. However, now he has the only 7 forms of martial soul on the mainland. It also possesses soul power that surpasses innate level 20, and is likely to be innate level 30. With such strength, I can be considered a genius among geniuses on this continent. It's only a matter of time before I want revenge. Moreover, he is backed by the great mountain of the martial soul hall, so he must become stronger and seek revenge. Qianye looked at Qian Daoliu and said, "I must avenge this grudge with my own hands." "Have you figured it out? This road must be very difficult." Qian Daoliu looked at Qianye and asked. "I've figured it out," Qianye nodded and said. "Okay, starting from tomorrow, I'll give you special training." Qian Daoliu looked at Qianye and said. Qianye nodded. Afterwards, Qian Daoliu left. Qianye, alone in the room, began to investigate his martial soul. When awakening the martial soul, a message entered Qianye's mind, helping Qianye understand this martial soul. The Seven Sins Angel martial soul has a total of 7 forms, each with different abilities. Although he only has one martial soul, as long as he attaches one soul ring, he will have 7 soul skills, which is equivalent to having 7 martial souls. Firstly, the sin of arrogance bestows upon him the pupils of control. Arrogance is arrogance towards everything, contempt for everything, including the gods. The martial soul of the Eye of Control is manifested above the eyes of Qianye. Upon opening the arrogant form, Qianye's eyes will become the Eye of Control. The ability to control the pupils is very simple, which is to control others through the pupils. The crime of anger bestows upon Qianye the power of madness. Opening the fury form, Qianye will condense the blood armor and then fall into a frenzy. Under the fury form, Qianye's various aspects will receive double improvement. The sin of greed bestows upon 1,000 knights the treasure trove of kings. The biggest characteristic of greed is the abundance of treasures. By opening the greedy form, Qianye can obtain many treasures from the king's treasure trove. The sin of jealousy bestows upon Qianye the ability to change and replicate. The characteristic of jealousy is jealousy towards others, wanting to become others, thus giving rise to the ability to change and replicate. The ability bestowed upon Qianye by laziness is to create dreams. By activating the lazy mode, Qianye will become drowsy. However, after Qianye falls asleep, he can create dreams. He can create nightmares for others or create illusions. Moreover, laziness itself has a very tall and strong physique. Even without using abilities, Qianye in lazy mode will still be very strong with physical strength. The form of sexual desire bestows control upon Qianye, similar to the charm of Xiaowu and Helena. When Qianye opens the form of sexual desire, he possesses the ability to charm. The form of sexual desire can also stimulate the desires of oneself and enemies. Finally, there is the form of gluttony, which bestows upon Qianye the ability to devour. Activate the binge-eating mode, and Qianye will become very hungry, requiring energy replenishment. It can devour soul power or directly devour flesh and blood. Another characteristic of binge-eating is its strong regenerative ability. No matter how severely injured it is, as long as it does not die, it can regenerate. Of course, these 7 forms are far more than just these forces, they are mainly these forces. With the possession of soul rings, these abilities will become even more powerful when manifested through soul skills. And with the emergence of soul skills, these powers will also be upgraded with soul skills. Qianye looked at these powers and nodded in satisfaction. Although he only has one martial soul, these 7 forms are equivalent to having 7 martial souls. With such power, it should not be difficult to seek revenge from Emperor Haotian in the future. End of this chapter. Chapter 6. The Thousand Nights Special Training begins. Various requests for new books. You are listening at novelfull.audio. Chapter 6. The Thousand Nights Special Training begins. Various requests for new books. The next day, Qian Daoliu left the Martial Soul Hall with Qianye. Father, where are we going? Qianye looked at Qian Daoliu and asked. Qian Daoliu looked at Qianye calmly and said, "Didn't you let me train you? For a soul master, the best training is practical combat. And you are born at level 20 or even level 30, so I am planning to take you to the Star Forest to attach a soul ring to you." Qianye nodded slightly. Qian Daoliu continued, "Since you want to become stronger, then you will handle all the dangers along the way. I am only responsible for following behind you. Unless there is a fatal danger, I will not take action." Qianye looked at Qian Daoliu and knew that his father had also put in a cruel effort. But my father is right. Since it's a special training, if it's not a bit dangerous, is it still called a special training? Qian Daoliu handed Qianye a map and said, "This is the map to the Star Forest. During your journey to the Star Forest, unless you encounter an enemy you cannot solve, I will not appear. Qianye didn't expect her father to do it so thoroughly, but it's also good that she won't place her hopes on her father anymore. In that case, one can only unleash their potential in that dangerous situation. When we reach the Starry Forest, where are we looking for a suitable soul ring? Qianye looked at Qian Daoliu and asked. Qian Daoliu calmly said, choosing a soul ring is very important. At that time, I will appear. Qianye nodded and said, I understand. Qian Daoliu looked at Qianye and immediately said, Xiaoyi, you still have time to regret now. If you don't want revenge, these special training are not needed. I can protect you for a lifetime. Qianye shook his head and said, I have made up my mind. No matter what special training, I can accept it. Okay then, let's go. Qian Daoliu handed a bag to Qianye, which contained some food and water, as well as a beautiful dagger. Immediately, the figure of Qian Daoliu flashed and disappeared directly in front of Qianye. Qianye put on his backpack and immediately rushed towards the Starry Forest. Although his father said he usually doesn't care about him, when he encounters a fatal danger, he naturally takes action, so Qianye can still be considered safe. Qianye put on his backpack, opened the map, and immediately ran towards the direction of the Starry Forest. Along the way, Qianye kept running at a constant speed, which can be considered as a form of exercise and also exercise his control over soul power. Qianye walked alone all the way without talking to anyone, which saved him trouble. However, as Qianye passed by a small path, suddenly several people came out and blocked Qianye's path. Qianye is the son of Qian Daoliu, therefore, Qianye's attire is all in that splendid attire, making people immediately know that he is a wealthy young master. A few people walked out in an instant, surrounded Qianye in groups, and immediately shouted, robbery. Douluo continent is a world where the strong are respected, and in such a world, there are naturally many people who go up the mountain to become bandits. These few people should be the bandits here. Now it seems that Qianye is just a child of 6 or 7 years old, dressed so well. Such a kid is like a lamb delivered to his mouth. They don't rob this kid, but who are they robbing? Qianye stopped and raised his eyes slightly, looking at the people in front of him. His gaze was indifferent, as if he had not even paid attention to them. Being stared at by Qianye, several people suddenly felt uneasy. One of the strong men said coldly, Little rabbit, what are you looking at? Give up the valuable things on your body quickly, otherwise, believe it or not, I'll kill you. Qianye looked at these people and immediately closed his eyes, taking a long breath. Although he had been mentally prepared for a long time, after all, it was his first time preparing to kill, so he still needed to do some mental construction. Immediately, Qianye opened his eyes and was ready. He looked at them and said, Now I give you 2 choices. Either go or die. Qianye spoke very calmly, as if telling an extremely ordinary thing. Listening to Qianye's words, several bandits were stunned and immediately burst into laughter. They didn't expect that a young boy would dare to be so arrogant. Does he really think he has the right to compete with people like himself? This is the funniest joke I've ever heard this year. One of the strong men laughed heartily. The other few strong men laughed and turned back and forth. In their perception, Qianye was like a fool, so funny. This little brat actually wants to scare himself and others away with words. Damn it, this kid doesn't really have any skills, does he? A young man said with some suspicion. How could it be that he's just a 6-year-old child? What ability would he have to kill us? Why bother with so much? Since this little ghost is not witty, let's kill him. Take something and quickly change places to have a good time, said the other person. Hands on. The young man whispered and rushed forward first, punching Qianye. Get lost. Qianye let out a low growl. As Qianye spoke, dark auras erupted from his body, filling the entire space in an instant, causing the surrounding temperature to drop sharply. As soon as this breath appears, it feels like one is in an ice cellar, with a piercing chill sweeping through their entire body. At this moment, 6 pitch-black wings suddenly appeared behind Qianye. The pair of pitch-black wings gently shook, instantly sparking waves of cold storms, adding a lot of terrifying and gloomy atmosphere to the already icy atmosphere. At this moment, the robbers looked at Qianye in shock. Qianye was filled with a sinister and terrifying aura, like a demon, emitting an evil light that made people tremble. What kind of martial soul is this? This little brat's martial soul is so eerie. 6 wings, is it the legendary 6-winged angel? Nonsense, the 6-winged angels are the martial souls of the 1,000 families in the martial soul hall. They represent light and holiness. How could they be so evil? Beside Qianye, wisps of green mist slowly drifted away, appearing very mysterious and fearful. At this moment, everyone couldn't help but feel immense pressure. They all felt the threat that Qianye brought to them. Those few people encountered the pressure from Qianye and immediately said, "Brothers, open up your martial souls. I don't believe that so many of us can't deal with such a little brat." With the command of the middle-aged man in charge, the group of robbers quickly opened their martial souls one by one. End of this chapter. Chapter 7. Fury Form, Blood Armor. You are listening at novelfull.audio. Chapter 7. Fury Form, Blood Armor. At this moment, I saw the robbers releasing their martial souls one by one. Most of them were first-ring soul masters, with only the person in charge being a large soul master with 2 rings. Their soul rings are mostly white, even the great soul master is only a white, a yellow. Douluo continent, revered as soul master. Generally, stronger soul masters choose to pursue other professions. Only those who are destined to only become soul masters or great soul masters in their lifetime will choose to become bandits. So, these 6 robbers are not very powerful. Qianye looked at them with calm eyes. He knew that his father was following behind him, so he didn't have to worry about his life's safety. He just went all out to kill them. Qianye silently recited in her heart, "Furious Form." In an instant, the blood armor on Qianye's body began to condense, and in the blink of an eye, it turned into a set of blood-colored battle clothes, draped over his body, highlighting Qianye's figure, becoming even more upright and heroic. Meanwhile, strands of blood-colored flames swirled around him, revealing a hint of mystery. The 6 pitch-black wings behind turned into substantial sharp blades, emitting a terrifying aura. The current Qianye is like an armored warrior that Qianye has seen. The black and red armor is worn on Qianye's body, making him even more noble and majestic, like a peerless emperor. Isn't this kid's martial soul a dark angel? How could it turn into armor? Several robbers were somewhat surprised. At this moment, a crimson light flickered in Qianye's eyes, with a strong smell of blood on his body. His eyes were cold, as if from the 9 netherworld, making his soul tremble. Qianye instantly felt her whole body filled with strength. Under this angry form, he will double in all aspects, and with this blood armor, his attack and defense have greatly increased, and even his speed has greatly increased. This has made Qianye's combat power soar, and he has no pressure to deal with these weak enemies. He stomped on the ground with his right foot and rushed out, slapping the robber who had just attacked him with one palm. Blood shone brightly on his palm. "Be careful." The remaining 5 people exclaimed in surprise. Qianye's movements were too fast for them to react at all. Bang! A dull collision sound sounded, and Qianye slapped the robber hard on the chest. A strong pain spread from his chest all over his body, and the robber flew backwards. His chest collapsed, and several ribs broke, hitting the ground heavily. After a single blow, Qianye charged out again. Qianye's speed was too fast, like a lightning bolt, appearing next to the robber in an instant, sweeping his legs across his waist. The robber's pupils suddenly shrank, and his arms resisted the attack of Qianye, but they still couldn't. Click, click! Only a crisp sound sounded, and the person's arm was directly broken, while Qianye's attack was not hindered at all. With a whoosh, the person's neck was cut off by Qianye's sweep, their head fell to the ground, and blood spurted wildly, staining it red. Qianye ignored the corpse and continued to kill it. Although the Soul Masters released their soul skills to attack Qianye, the attack on Qianye's blood armor had no effect at all. Qianye slowly extended his hand, and immediately on top of the armor, blood overflowed and condensed into a blood sword. Qianye held a blood sword in his hand and killed a group of people. His figure was like an electric shock, and blood burst out. Every sword passed by, accompanied by the drop of a head. The blood of Qianye contains terrifying power, even ordinary attacks can cause fatal damage. At this moment, Qianye's movements were too fast, so fast that everyone couldn't even catch his shadow. In a moment, 5 people, except for the Great Soul Master, collapsed in front of Qianye. Finally, only the Great Soul Master remained. The Great Soul Master looked at Qianye in great fear, with a look of panic in his eyes. "Who the hell are you? How could you be so powerful?" the Great Soul Master exclaimed with a pale face. "Death," Qianye said indifferently. Before he could finish speaking, he appeared directly next to the Great Soul Master, his blood-colored long sword cutting through the void and instantly slashing down, cutting open the neck of the Great Soul Master. Blood spurted out and splashed around, staining the ground red. After killing the person, Qianye's angry form was lifted, and soon the blood armor on Qianye's body disappeared. Looking at the corpses on the ground, Qianye murmured, "Is this the form of rage? It's really useful in this kind of killing situation. However, it consumes a lot of soul power." After speaking, Qianye didn't care about these corpses and immediately continued to run towards the direction of the Starry Forest at a constant speed. Stop drinking water when thirsty, and eat some dry food when hungry. Qianye exercised all the way and ran towards the Starry Forest. 2.5 days. Qianye finally arrived in front of the Starry Forest. A huge forest stands in front of Qianye, with huge trees towering into the clouds, as if a huge staircase leading to the sky. The entrance of the forest is covered by a dense thicket, resembling a maze-like gateway. As soon as entering the forest, Qianye felt a strong breath of life. The sunlight shines through the dense leaves, forming mottled spots of light. The gentle breeze blows, and the leaves make a rustling sound, as if nature is whispering. In the Starry Forest, vibrant vegetation is abundant and diverse, with various exotic flowers and plants competing for beauty. The colorful flowers emit a charming fragrance, attracting butterflies and bees to dance among them. The towering trees surround a lush thicket, like a natural maze. The low roar of soul beasts came from around, appearing particularly piercing. Qianye took a deep breath and walked into the forest. The forest is shrouded in mist, with faintly visible vines crisscrossing one after another, as well as ancient trees with lush branches and leaves. In the center of the forest, there is a mountain peak that gives a majestic feeling when viewed from afar. Qianye's footsteps were gentle yet swift, and her body movements were unpredictable. Soon, Qianye had entered the inner area of the forest. At this moment, a sound immediately sounded. "Xiaoye, you did a good job." The sound fell, and soon a tall figure fell in front of Qianye. The newcomer is none other than Qianye's adoptive father and Qian Daoliu. Seeing Qian Daoliu, Qianye immediately said, "Father." Qian Daoliu smiled slightly and said, "All right, from now on, follow me and I'll take you to find the right soul beast." Qianye nodded and followed behind Qian Daoliu, walking towards the depths of the Starry Forest. End of this chapter. Chapter 8. Starry Forest, Hunting Soul Beasts. You are listening at novelfull.audio. Chapter 8 Starry Forest, Hunting Soul Beasts. As Qian Daoliu and Qianye delve deep into the Starry Forest, the surrounding atmosphere becomes increasingly strong, accompanied by the low growls of various strange soul beasts. In this mysterious and terrifying forest, Qianye felt a powerful threat. In the dense forest, a pair of red eyes suddenly flickered with light, like the eyes of a devil. It is a fiery wolf, covered in blazing flames, suddenly charging towards Qianye. The speed of the flame wolf is extremely fast, leaving a shadow in the air like a shooting star crossing the night sky. Qian Daoliu did not make a move. After all, the best training is practical combat. However, the flame wolf, a soul beast that has only been around for 20 or 30 years, poses no threat to Qianye at all. Qianye's martial soul was not released, and he directly drew the dagger. His body immediately flashed and he came to the front of the flame wolf in an instant. The dagger was instantly inserted. The flame wolf died in front of Qianye with all its might. Moving forward again, a pitch-black antennae suddenly grew on the nearby trees, attacking Qianye like claws. This is a shadow spider, whose body almost blends into the trunk of the tree, making it difficult for people to notice. Its tentacles are extremely sharp, and once touched, they will inject poison, causing people to lose their mobility. The shadow spider clearly did not expect Qianye to stand in front of it unprepared, with a glimmer of joy in its eyes and a sticky black venom spitting out from its mouth. Qianye's figure flashed, and in an instant, he dodged the attack of the venom. His wrist twitched slightly, and his dagger caught a hint of silver, heading straight towards the shadow spider to slay it. Ding! The sound of metal resonance resounded out loud. The body of the shadow spider was suddenly shaken and flew out, landing on the ground. After struggling a few times, there was no sound left. Qianye continued to walk inside, and along the way, he encountered many soul beasts. Poisonous lizards, unicorn snakes, poisonous centipedes, and even 2 venomous insects with hundreds of years of cultivation were encountered. But without any surprise, everything was resolved by Qianye. Qianye started exercising before awakening his martial soul, because he had carried hatred since childhood. Therefore, from a young age, he began to exercise his body. Some are 10-year soul beasts, and Qianye can even kill them without the power of a martial soul. As for some century-old soul beasts, Qianye is about to release his martial soul. However, they were easily solved by Qianye. Qian Daoliu followed Qianye's side and immediately said, "Xiaoyi, your martial soul has a dark attribute, so it is better to have a soul ring with a dark attribute. If a soul beast with a light attribute has conflicting attributes, it may become very dangerous." After listening, Qianye nodded slightly. Although he is only 6 years old, he has read many novels about Douluo in his previous life, so he still has a certain understanding of martial souls. Qianye thought for a moment and asked, "Father, can absorbing soul rings break through the theoretical lifespan of soul beasts?" Qian Daoliu thought for a moment and said, "The duration of a person's absorption of soul rings is related to their physical and mental strength. The stronger their physical and mental strength, the longer they will absorb soul rings." Qian Daoliu thought for a moment and continued, "I remember hearing that there was a scammer who came to our martial soul hall and proposed the top 10 core competencies of martial soul. Many people in the martial soul hall believed it at that time. However, in my opinion, that kind of statement is basically bullshit." Upon hearing this, Qianye knew who it was. What other people besides Tang San's teacher, the Sodot called Master Prison Little Anus, would there be among the deceitful and deceitful fraudsters? Qian Daoliu continued, "There are many of the top 10 core competencies of the martial soul, which he copied from the library of our martial soul palace. He just took them and summarized them. He created a gimmick, which is his thing. The remaining few were all fabricated by him without much persuasiveness. However, he did cause a lot of sensation when he was in our martial soul hall, so he even managed to secure a position as the elder of the martial soul hall." Qianye listened to Qian Daoliu's narration and immediately asked, "What happened later?" Qian Daoliu smiled slightly and said, "I didn't pay much attention to the specific matter, but later I heard that the person left the martial soul hall and disappeared from sight." "Why did he leave the martial soul hall?" Qianye continued to ask. Qian Daoliu spoke up and said, "I don't know, it's just a river and lake scammer. I didn't pay much attention to him." If he leaves the martial soul hall, it's just that he can't be deceived anymore. Qian Daoliu doesn't really know much about it. If it weren't for his later investigation of Bibidong and finding out that Bibidong likes that river and lake scammer, otherwise he might not even know that there is such a person in the martial soul hall. Qian Daoliu continued, in short, with your physique, you should have no problem absorbing soul rings for 400 to 500 years. Qianye nodded and the two continued walking towards the front. At this moment, suddenly, a low roar came from the forest, followed by a gust of strong wind. This is Qianye raised his eyebrows and looked up, only to see a huge fierce bird descending from the sky in the distance, blocking the sky and sun. This fierce bird has a body that is over 10 meters long, with its wings spread out and covering the sky and earth like dark clouds pressing down on the top. Under the waving of those massive wings, a fierce wind blew. This is a huge eagle, all presented in black, with a surface covered in grayish-brown stripes and blood-red eyes, giving the impression of a killing machine. Qian Daoliu looked at the soul beast and immediately said, "Dark blood demon eagle, this soul beast is very suitable for you. Unfortunately, this soul beast is from 1,000 years ago." Qianye looked at the dark blood demon eagle and in an instant, the blood demon eagle rushed towards Qianye. Qianye knows that if he wants revenge, he must be perverted enough. He is not satisfied with the centenary of the first soul ring, he wants to try the Millennium soul ring. Thinking of this, Qianye murmured, "That's it." Speaking, Qianye once again released his martial soul, and 6 black wings instantly stretched out and flew up, avoiding the impact of the dark blood demon eagle. He was suspended in mid-air, looking at the dark blood demon eagle rushing towards him, his face full of war intent. Yay! The dark blood demon eagle roared up to the sky, diving down fiercely, with a crazy bloodthirsty aura flashing in its eyes. Bang! Qianye exerted his strength under his feet, and his body suddenly turned into a remnant to greet him. The dagger in his hand pierced out instantly, creating a brilliant blade that ignited a string of sparks and fiercely struck the body of the dark blood demon eagle. Kang! The wings of the dark blood demon eagle patted against him, making a crisp sound like the clash of gold and iron. Qianye's body took a few steps back, feeling a tingling sensation all over. But the dark blood demon eagle, still lively and lively, once again spread its huge wings and charged towards Qianye. The speed of the dark blood demon eagle is extremely fast, with its claws tearing through the air like sharp blades, making a sharp whistling sound. Qianye's eyes narrowed slightly, and he clenched the dagger in his hands, sweeping it out in the air. The blade's rays bloomed, instantly blocking the attack of the dark blood demon eagle. Immediately, Qianye silently recited, "Arrogant form." End of this chapter. Chapter 9. Millennium Soul Ring. You are listening at novelfull.audio. Chapter 9 Millennium Soul Ring. Qianye directly activated his arrogant form, and immediately, Qianye's body did not undergo any changes. Just Qianye's eyes changed instantly, and Qianye's eyes turned red, as if stained with blood. A crimson hue emanated from his pupils, adding a touch of evil charm to his appearance. At this moment, Qian Daoliu saw Qianye's eyes and immediately showed a surprised expression. He murmured, "Is this just an ability in Xiaoye's martial soul?" Qianye's crimson eyes instantly stared at the dark blood demon eagle, their eyes facing each other. In an instant, the dark blood demon eagle seemed to see something incredibly terrifying, with its brain blank and instantly controlled by Qianye. In the next moment, the dark blood demon eagle's eyes froze in place, completely losing its ability to resist. Bang! With a loud bang, the dark blood demon eagle suddenly collided with a nearby stone. In an instant, the boulder shattered and smoke billowed. Qianye spoke calmly again, "Greedy form." Immediately, a vortex of energy appeared in the air, which was the door connecting the treasure trove of the greedy king. Qianye reached out and entered the door. Immediately, a pitch-black spear was pulled out by Qianye. Qianye held the long spear in his hand and suddenly felt an extremely powerful force. The spear was dark all over, with various complex runes scattered on the barrel. The spear had a sharp edge, revealing a cold light. In the treasure trove of the greedy king, there are countless rare treasures stored, each with strange abilities. This spear is just one of them. Qianye held a long spear, and the wings behind him suddenly exerted force, bringing Qianye to the front of the dark blood demon eagle in an instant. At this moment, the dark blood demon eagle had regained its clarity, but the scene just now was too shocking. It even doubted whether what had just happened was real or illusory. Looking at the long spear in Qianye's hand, the dark blood demon eagle couldn't help but tremble. A strong sense of danger permeated the surroundings, and it only felt as if it was about to die at any time, making people tremble and fear uncontrollably. A strange smile rose from the corner of Qianye's mouth, and he slowly raised his long gun in his hand. The dark blood demon eagle was so frightened that it quickly lay on the ground, afraid to move. Its blood-red eyes were filled with shock and fear, and its body was trembling slightly, constantly twisting. Although it is a Millennium Soul Beast, after all, it is just an ordinary Millennium Soul Beast. Faced with such a terrifying spear, how can it not be afraid? Qianye held a long spear in his hand, with the tip of the spear pointing straight at the neck of the dark blood demon eagle, and shot it out. Pushi, plasma splattered, accompanied by a muffled groan and a mournful cry. I saw a blood hole pierce through the throat of the dark blood demon eagle, and crimson blood gushed out, rendering the earth red. The body of the dark blood demon eagle trembled violently. Quickly, the vitality of the dark blood demon eagle dissipated, and finally it fell to the ground with a loud bang. Although the dark blood demon eagle is a Millennium Soul Beast, the weapons in the king's treasure trove of Qianye are obviously very powerful. Therefore, this dark blood demon eagle naturally cannot withstand a shot from Qianye. At this moment, Qian Daoliu in the distance looked at this scene and was shocked to see Qianye ask, "Xiaoye, are these all your abilities?" Qianye nodded and said, "Not bad, my martial soul has given me a lot of abilities. You have seen a few of them, and there are still a few abilities that I haven't fully figured out yet." Qian Daoliu nodded and said, "When you killed those bandits before, I also saw it. It should be a strengthening ability. And the two abilities you are showing now, it seems that your martial soul is extraordinary." Qianye nodded without explaining in detail. He knew that it was impossible for him to hide his abilities in front of his adoptive father. Therefore, he can only roughly tell him about his abilities. Of course, he will not tell about the legends he brought about the 7 sin angels from his past life. After all, if these legends were spoken, he would not be able to explain them clearly. Qian Daoliu understood and showed a surprised expression. Because he had never heard of such a martial soul before, but since the Douluo continent is so large and the martial souls are so diverse, it is possible to have any kind of martial soul. Therefore, he naturally believed in Qianye very much. Qianye looked at the body of the dark blood demon eagle, and a purple soul ring immediately floated out. Qianye looked at the purple soul ring and immediately said, "Father, I want to absorb this soul ring." Upon hearing this, Qian Daoliu looked at Qianye Dao with some shock and said, "Xiaoye, you must think carefully. The first soul ring, Qianyen, has never been done like this before." Qianye firmly said, "My martial soul has a form that has regeneration ability, so I want to challenge it." After thinking for a moment, Qian Daoliu nodded and said, "You have been exercising since you were young, and your physique is different from ordinary people. You also have the ability to regenerate. I am by your side, maybe you can really challenge yourself. If the challenge is successful, you will definitely create history." Qianye nodded and said, "I want to try." Qianye once again released his martial soul and immediately began his binge-eating form. In an instant, Qianye's body grew larger and he transformed into a giant, looking like an immensely huge demon. At the moment when he started his binge-eating mode, Qianye felt waves of hunger, a feeling that he wished he could eat everything around him. Qianye did not absorb the soul ring at the first time, but opened his backpack and quickly took out all the dry food, eating it all. However, even so, I still feel very hungry. Qianye, facing hunger, came to the purple soul ring and immediately sat down to absorb it. The purple soul ring immediately rose and reached the top of Qianye's head. Suddenly, an endless purple light burst out, like a star descending, and the entire valley fell into a brilliant purple. Qianye's mind twitched, and soon the purple soul transformed into a stream of light, following Qianye's forehead and penetrating deep into Qianye's eyebrows. Suddenly, the purple soul ring began to stir incessantly, tearing at Qianye's body as if about to burst out. Qianye's body was immediately filled with endless pain, as if it was about to be torn apart alive. Endless sweat appeared on his face, but he gritted his teeth and endured the pain. The purple soul ring is constantly wandering within Qianye's body, ravaging and crazily devouring everything, as if it is about to completely destroy Qianye. However, this pain also made Qianye more conscious. He knew that the more painful it was, the stronger the purple soul ring was, and the stronger the ability he gained. Qianye gritted his teeth tightly and persevered, but after only a moment, his face began to become ferocious and twisted, with blood oozing from his mouth. That's because under this pain, his spirit couldn't bear it and almost collapsed. Qianye worked hard to stabilize her spirit, striving to control herself from falling into a coma. End of this chapter. Chapter 10. 1 Soul Ring, 7 Soul Techniques. You are listening at novelfull.audio. Chapter 10 1 Soul Ring, 7 Soul Techniques. At this moment, Qianye's body began to rupture, with bloodstains appearing on her skin. Qianye's eyes were full of resilience, and he knew that it had just begun. However, under his binge-eating form, he has the ability to regenerate and slowly restore Qianye's body. Gradually, his injuries healed, but Qianye's face had completely twisted, appearing particularly painful. This kind of pain, even surpassing any pain that Qianye has ever experienced, is simply unbearable. Qianye clenched his fists tightly, his veins bulging, staring intently at the purple soul ring. He knew he had to persevere. Finally, the purple soul ring disappeared and was replaced by circles of purple and gold soul power. These purple and gold soul powers were constantly intertwined, constantly merging into Qianye's body. Qianye gritted his teeth and persisted, the sweat on his head dripping like a spring, and his clothes were already soaked through. However, he gritted his teeth tightly and refused to say a word. Suddenly, Qianye let out a muffled groan, with a fierce expression of pain on his face. He gritted his teeth tightly, afraid to make even the slightest sound. Qianye knew that if it weren't for her gluttonous form and terrifying regenerative ability, she would have been torn apart by this terrifying soul power long ago. But even so, the terrifying soul power is still crazily ravaging his body and spirit. Qianye persevered, knowing that he couldn't fall down. I don't know how long it took, but Qianye's breathing gradually stabilized. His painful expression also began to slowly relax, and finally, it became easier again. As he relaxed, everything around him seemed to slow down and become much quieter. Qianye's eyes began to flicker with strange purple arcs. The surface of Qianye's body is covered with a faint purple luster. A purple soul ring emerged from Qianye's body, and he finally held on and absorbed this millennium-old soul ring. The first soul ring for 1,000 years, except for Qianye, which can be regenerated. I'm afraid no one dares to try it this way. The wings behind extended, and a powerful wave of soul power immediately permeated Qianye's body, causing Qianye's breath to begin to climb. Immediately, Qianye's originally soft and flowing black long hair began to dance. Under the wind, an inexplicable rhythm was stirred up, as if it was in harmony with the surrounding space, giving people a beautiful feeling. A pair of pupils also flickered with purple arcs. At this moment, Qianye's soul power was also increasing, but he had not yet attached a second soul ring, and it was still unclear how many levels he had. Qian Daoliu looked at Qianye in surprise and immediately approached her, asking, "Xiaoye, how do you feel? Are you feeling any discomfort? At this moment, Qianye only answered one word. Hungry. The food that Qian Daoliu was about to bring was all given to Qianye. Qianye began to devour it greedily, with his mouth bulging and eating it with relish in just a few bites. However, after eating those foods, Qianye still hasn't had enough. This is the form of binge eating, which consumes a significant amount of food and energy. After finishing the meal, Qianye still felt hungry. Soon, Qianye saw a few rabbits and grabbed them directly. He then lit up the fire and began to barbecue. While having a barbecue, Qian Daoliu smiled and looked at Qianye, asking, "Xiaoyi, what soul skills have you awakened?" Qianye barbecued the rabbit and smiled at the corner of his mouth, saying, "Father, I tell you, don't be surprised." Qian Daoliu nodded and immediately said, "Don't worry, as a father, I have seen some of the world before, so I shouldn't be very surprised." Qianye flipped and roasted the rabbit while saying, "Father, I have awakened 7 soul skills." As soon as these words were spoken, Qian Daoliu's originally calm face suddenly showed an extremely shocked expression, and he said in shock, "What? Awakened 7 soul skills?" Qianye nodded. At this moment, the roasted rabbit of Qianye is already sizzling with oil, and the fragrance fills the nose. Qian Daoliu looked at Qianye's appearance and smiled slightly, saying, "Let's eat first." Qianye nodded and immediately began to eat. The roasted rabbit, in front of Qianye, was eliminated by Qianye's 3, 5, and 2 division. Even though Qianye lifted his binge-eating habits, he still ate a total of 3 roasted rabbits and finally solved his hunger. After finishing, Qianye began to check his soul skills. Although Qianye only has 1 martial soul, this martial soul has 7 forms, and the absorbed soul skill has evolved into its own soul skill. Pride form first soul skill. Eye of Control. After opening the Eye of Control, Qianye can control the enemy for a period of time. At that time, the enemy cannot resist and will absolutely obey. Fury form first soul skill. 1 layer of explosive health. After activating the Fury form and attaching the blood armor, you can continue to burst health. After exploding health, all attributes are increased by 100%. Greedy form's first soul skill. Weapon summoning. Activate the greedy form to summon a weapon, and also switch between weapons. The first soul skill of jealousy form. Change. After activating the form of jealousy, Qianye can transform into anyone's appearance, even changing her breath. The first soul skill of lazy form. Nightmare. By activating the lazy form, Qianye can enter other people's dreams and create nightmares for them. When their spiritual power is strong enough, they can even kill opponents in their dreams. The first soul skill in the form of sexual desire. Charm. Activate the form of sexual desire, Qianye can enchant enemies and directly stun them. The difference between charm and the Eye of Control is that although charm cannot make enemies obey absolutely, it is not limited by soul power. Even if it is a title Douluo, it will still be enchanted. The Eye of Control has soul power limitations, and the higher the enemy's soul power, the shorter the duration of control. The first soul skill of gluttony form. Regeneration. After injury, the body can regenerate and recover, but it needs to be replenished with food afterwards. The more severe the injury, the more food is needed. Although Qianye could have achieved it with his martial soul without soul skills, possessing soul skills would double his regenerative ability. Qianye roughly told her father some of these soul skills. After all, these soul skills will be used in the future, and even Qianye is difficult to hide. It's better to speak them out directly. After listening, Qian Daoliu's eyes were filled with surprise. This really shocked him too much. Although Qianye only has 1 martial soul, it definitely surpasses the genius of twin martial souls. Twin martial souls also require 2 soul rings to have 2 soul skills, but for Qianye, adding 1 soul ring can give you 7 soul skills. It's not an exaggeration to say that this is the 7 Lives martial soul. Thinking of this, Qian Daoliu excitedly grabbed Qianye and slowly said, Xiao Yi, you have the posture of becoming a god. End of this chapter.